Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, Right Livelihood family, thank you. I'm so privileged, so happy to be here. In much the same way as a vigneron manages his grapevines, farmer-managed natural regeneration, or FMNR, is a technique that involves growing indigenous trees from existing stumps, roots, and seeds through selection, pruning, and managing the growing stems. And by choosing the right plants and by pruning and protecting them in a certain way, very rapid reforestation at low cost is possible, meeting farmers' needs while addressing pressing environmental issues. The Right Livelihood Award recognises nearly 40 years of hard work and dedication to a cause that is a response to a child's prayer asking to be used somehow, somewhere to make a difference. During a 7-year period immediately prior to this discovery, or more accurately, rediscovery, because it's built on traditional knowledge, the rediscovery of FMNR, international organisations and West African governments spent an estimated $160 million on reforestation efforts. The end result of all that effort? Some 20,000 hectares of not doing very well plantations. That is $8,000 per hectare. Following the rediscovery and promotion of FMNR in 1983, the method spread to some 5 million hectares at a rate of 250,000 hectares per year for 20 years in Niger Republic. I'm not pointing the finger at anybody because I did exactly the same thing myself for 2.5 years, planting trees and failing miserably. And at a point of desperation and wanting to give up, it was only an answer to prayer again, to a desperate prayer, that opened my eyes to what actually had been literally at my feet and had been there the whole time. Today there are over 200 million trees being managed by farmers sustainably in a landscape which was previously all but treeless. And the cost, in terms of investment by projects, the cost was certainly much less than $10 million or $2 per hectare. This is because most of the cost is borne by the farmers themselves. If a value were to be put on their labour, it would be in the order of $14 to $20 per hectare, much, much less than the $8,000 that I previously mentioned. So what? What's the significance? The FMNR movement in Niger demonstrated that desertification could be reversed, and it could be done so at low cost, quickly, and at scale. And to my knowledge, something which hadn't been demonstrated previously. Well, that is important to me. It was what came with it that turned me into a passionate and tireless campaigner for promoting FMNR. As a result of returning trees into the farming landscape and at an average density of 40 per hectare, today in Niger, additional gross income, in other words, the value of what is consumed plus what people sell, is going directly to farmers, is in the order of $900 million per year, every year, without any ongoing project intervention. Nigerian farmers are growing an additional 500,000 tonnes of grain annually, enough to feed 2.5 million people, without fertilisers, without subsidies, irrigation or improved seed. In other words, FMNR enabled and empowered amongst the world's poorest and most marginalised people to largely lift themselves out of absolute poverty and chronic hunger. Having witnessed the horrors and deprivations of famine firsthand, and subsequently being witness to the transformational changes wrought by ordinary people embracing FMNR, I'm convinced, I'm convicted, I'm compelled to a life of sharing this amazing story and this transformative technique. How could I, or anybody else who truly grasps the significance of this simple technique, and the impact that it's had on people's lives, how could I be silent? And this leads me to bring up an even greater expression of this award, expression of why this award is important than mere recognition. Intentionally or not, in the millions of voiceless, marginalised and poor farmers, in that millions of voiceless, marginalised and poor farmers did the actual work of FMNR, the award acknowledges that poor people are only victims of poverty and beholden to the largesse of the rich to the degree that they are denied knowledge of how to work with nature instead of fighting against it, and to the degree that they are denied access and legal user rights to the natural resource base, that is, the vegetation, the land, the water, the natural resource base upon which all life on earth depends. Surely the award celebrates and is a testimony to their intelligence, their perseverance, and their dignity. And I salute Yakuba Saradago for the wonderful work that he's doing. One of my favorite stories occurred as I was preparing to leave Niger. My wife and family and I lived in Niger 17 years. And I had some overseas visitors at the time who wanted to see the work. So we drove to the villages, and instead of going straight to the fields, we sat under the shade of a tree. And as is normal in Africa, a crowd gathered around. And maybe because I was feeling a bit down, I'd lived there so long, these were my friends. I loved the work, I loved the people. I asked them, what was the most significant impact of all the different project activities over those 17 years? And I was racing through my mind, surely they would have to mention how FMNR had transformed their lives and their landscape, stopping those 70-kilometre-per-hour winds which used to bury their seed and shoot blinding dust into their eyes, providing fuel wood close at hand and alleviating a great burden on women and children who sometimes had to walk for hours just to search for the fuel to cook their food. They didn't mention it. Perhaps I thought they would mention the famine relief work which had saved so many lives and reduced suffering. Nope, not this either. Or perhaps they would mention the new well, and women, again, women really suffered seeking water. The fuel-efficient cook stoves or the improved poultry, not even close. And I was getting a little bit down by this stage. What they did share with me has stayed with me ever since. They said, Mr. Tony, before this project came, we were nothing and nobody. We were not known to the world or even to our own government. We were not important to anybody. All that we ever saw of our own district chief was the dust from his vehicles as he spread through our village. The only time we saw somebody from the forestry department was when they came to fine us for cutting down trees. All we knew of the outside world was what we heard on the BBC. However, today, because of this project, the chief stops and seeks our counsel. The forestry department holds us up as an example to the whole nation on how to repair degraded land. And we regularly receive visitors from all around the world. Today, we are somebody and we're known. And it dawned on me, I'd been thinking in terms of, we need to feed these people, we need to help them, they're poor. But what was really important for them was their self-respect and their dignity. And as important as trees and the impact of trees on livelihoods and food security are, that day I realized that the real story, the thing that mattered most, was what was happening on the inside of people that I worked with. Looking forward, what the award could mean for the FMNR movement globally is potentially very, very significant. The prize money is specifically for the furtherance of the cause. These funds will be used to introduce FMNR into new areas where it is not yet known, as well as for the further entrenchment in areas where it's been started but it hasn't established. Beyond finance, though, the award itself gives FM&R a profile that simply didn't exist before. Despite the significance and the increasingly well-documented impact, FM&R is relatively unknown to national governments, international aid agencies and donors. The Right Livelihood Award Foundation makes a point of supporting the causes of its laureates through introductions to media, potential donors, government policy makers, and to the fraternity of past laureates. I believe that this award will enhance and speed up the activities which international organisations such as my own World Vision and the Global Evergreening Alliance are already heavily engaged in, including contributing to Africa's goal of restoring 100 million hectares of degraded land. And the overarching Bonn Global Challenge of restoring 350 million hectares of degraded land globally by 2030. 1 hectare of degraded land is 1 hectare too many. The World Resources Institute says that there are at least 2 billion hectares of degraded land worldwide. 1 person hungry is 1 person too many. Currently tonight, 815 million people will go to sleep hungry as they do every night. The UNCCC gives us 10 years to rein in greenhouse gases before we are exposed to runaway climate change. For the last 20 years, I and others have been providing evidence which demands a verdict. When the poorest country in the world, on the edge of the Sahara Desert, under very, very harsh growing conditions, with no government assistance at that time and minimal NGO intervention, can effect an environmental, social and economic revolution that changed the trajectory of their history, what does that say to us? As the great philosopher lay dying on the footpath, he looked straight into his crying nephew's eyes and said, "With great power comes great responsibility." Actually, it was Spider-Man's uncle. But that does not lessen the truth of his wisdom. Who has power? Who has wealth? Who has agency? If it's not us in this room? And who has responsibility to avert current and future catastrophes? I learned some time back that my name, Tony, if you spell it backwards, it reads, "Why not?" I like that. And why not is a very good question. Why couldn't we effect a re-greening revolution that changes the destiny of current and future generations? Victor Hugo said, "There is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come." And I believe that FM&R's time has come. I believe that the time has come for an unprecedented re-greening movement. We have the evidence. We have the power. We have the wealth, we have the agency, and yes, we have the responsibility. Why not? Will you join me? Thank you.